right, this is exciting for me because it's the European continent to North American continent type of deal here. So welcome, Judith. It's great to see you.
No, thank you, Mark. Likewise.
We were just talking about it's been a long time where you have to go back a year and then go back from that year to see how long it's been. And I was really fortunate to be able to meet you at your former firm's event, SM.
In New York.
In New York City, exactly. And got a chance, which I was really grateful for. And how could we have a Leaders Who Care series and not have you on it? I mean, that would be ridiculous, right? So, so I'm really happy you're here and welcome. And great way to start would be if you could briefly share who you are, a little bit about personal, family, who you are. Maybe tell us something no one else knows, and you can tell everybody, or something like that. But just tell us a little bit about Judith.
Yeah, so I'm German, and there was a time where I said German by passport because for some reason I felt that was important to somewhat associate and disassociate with my passport, I think. And why is that? Because I think I fell in love with being international, different people, different cultures, when I was first in the US, which was at the age of 16, actually. So there you go. There's a personal detail. And ever since then, I've just wanted to lead that kind of lifestyle. So it's by no coincidence that my career has actually played out to be very international. That my formative years, 19 of which I spent in a company called Mars Incorporated, privately owned, very values driven. So I think that's where I learned both the ropes of my profession. And in Mars, the people and organization business has a firm seat at the table. But at the same time, how you really conduct business ethically and how decisions get derived, weighing up dilemmas on a values basis. So that I think had a lasting impact. And you mentioned DSM. This is where I had my first kind of lead role in the people and organization function, equally very values driven. And I think what DSM has done even more so is connect not only how it does business and conduct itself from a values perspective, but also from a purpose perspective in what you do, the kind of portfolio that you own, where you put your money in terms of innovation. And ever since October, I now have the fantastic opportunity to be part of Siemens, a big global technology company that really has a chance to influence the backbone of our economies in industry and infrastructure, mobility and healthcare. And I feel very privileged in being able to shape the next chapter of Siemens going forward.
No, I think you've landed in a fantastic place, to tell you the truth. But before we get into that more, tell us a little bit about family.
Yeah, so I'm the fortunate mother of two teenagers, and normally people would say, well, isn't that difficult? Well, in pandemic times, it has huge advantages to be the mother of children who can actually look after themselves on a day-to-day basis, and who don't need so much help from a homeschooling perspective. And I would say the pandemic, I've always found, has given me, I call it borrowed time with teenagers who typically would like to spend their time out of the house rather than with their parents at home. And I've been very blessed in that regard, that we're all healthy, that we're together, and that we have spent more time than we normally would have. So in that regard, I feel very blessed.
Yeah, I think you're right. Most people the teenagers would be out and about and get a chance to. So there's, if we can't learn from even tragedies like this, then we really missed an opportunity. And so I think that is a great point. Knowing a little bit, getting to know you a little bit and whatnot, and reading up on you, your first line describes you as, where you said, "I am a people person," which wasn't. I found that out in about 20 seconds when I first met you. So. But before we delve deeper into that, can you share with us, the infamous why, and since when did you discover? You kind of intimated a little bit, discover your why, and kind of like you say, you know, what is it like? Why do you do what you do? Or as you say, what makes you get up and get out of bed in the morning?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've always found it fascinating just to listen to people and their stories. I get a lot of, I'm a typical extrovert. I get a lot of energy from people. And when I think about my profession, what I love about business and about heading the people and organization function in business is that it's such a wonderful combination of the intellectual challenge that you get from technology, innovation, business models. But at the same time, I think business is far less rational than we sometimes like to make it. So whether it's Wall Street or any organization where people work together, I think at the end of the day, it is about how people work together, how they come together. That will determine a large part of the success of any organization. And to bring those two elements together, you know, the piece that is intellectually challenging, but then also the lovely messiness that comes with people, and the great potential that you have, you know, with, you know, in Siemens 290,000 who all have something to contribute, who all have great ideas, and how you actually mobilize that, I just find fascinating.
It's I love that term, the lovely mess of people. That's a great way to describe it, because it's like the perfect person is not perfect, basically. Yeah. Someone told me that as well, and so the lovely mess is a great way of describing it. You know, it's taken, you know, this, we've all seen this, it's taken decades for, you know, leaders of companies to align values, align with social impact, realizing it's actually better for business. It's definitely better to attract talent. And I talked about when I first met you, I know we talked a little bit about, you know, trust and empowerment, talked about inclusivity, we talked about responsibility, all key things that I know are important to you. How did you find bringing these values forward in your career as you advanced in your career, but also as a woman, and the whole aspect of women has changed dramatically, obviously over decades too, to transform and differentiate and empower other leaders, and to make you more empowered also as a, if you will, leader who cares?
I think it starts with, you know, knowing yourself and knowing what you stand for, and my North Star, and you know, I probably couldn't have articulated this so well 10 years ago, but my North Star, whether I'm at work or at home, is three core values, if you like. It's humanity, it's growth, and it's integrity. And how I translate that into my work environment is respect for people, and the fundamental belief that I think everybody deserves equal respect, and at the same time we're all very, very different and we have different things to offer. And I think great organizations like Siemens are trying to tap into the difference, but give everybody the same kind of voice and chance to contribute. And from an innovation perspective, as a technology company, this is just hugely important. The other thing that I believe is that trust breeds trust. And whilst that is a really nice value to have, and I'm sure something that people enjoy genuinely if they're being trusted for who they are and what they can do, I think there's also, again, a business imperative to this, because as the world changes, as it becomes much less predictable, you cannot afford for everything to run up the chain of command and go down the chain of command. So I think trust is actually something that unlocks speed in an organization, but also the collective wisdom of what the organization can offer. And, you know, this kind of notion of empowering people, letting them get on with their job, letting them make judgment calls, letting them decide and find the right solutions, because that's what they were hired for. That obviously comes with the other side of the coin, which is people taking responsibility and accepting the responsibility for their job, but also for themselves. And again, if I think about the times that we live in, and that change is a constant, I think it starts with, you know, knowing ourselves, knowing what makes us tick, what's good for us, what gives us energy, but also how we can remain relevant as professionals. And I always talk about the 50-year career that we have all now signed up for, and certainly our children will have signed up for. So it's really important that we embrace both change, but also lifelong learning to make sure that we remain relevant. And therefore, as an organization and as leaders, we have a huge role to play to help with that and to empower that. And I've been very lucky and fortunate in having worked now in 3 organizations that have really been on the journey. I don't think that you're ever entirely there, but that have certainly embraced that.
Yeah, you mentioned so many things there that, as I said before the call, we may have to have a sequel or maybe multiple sequels to be able to address them. But you're so right about trust, and I think the remote office has probably extrapolated that or expanded or whatever word you want to use even more, because you had to trust people who weren't even in the same office as you now to get the work done. And I relate a lot of things to sports. The best coaches in the world, stand up for their players, and the player that sees the coaches behind them and believes in them will do anything for that coach. It's not that much different from a parent even to a boss at a company. So it's fascinating. I had a conversation with somebody, I'd love your thoughts on this, about diversity and beyond that, even inclusion, and even beyond inclusion, like anti-racism against whomever. And the question came up about, how can you have systemic change if it has to be put into what's called best practices? Are they really the best practices, or should they be, and this is the word they used, trusted practices that evolve to be able to make systemic changes? Because they're asking, do we really have a chance to have different onboarding for individuals? Like, a white guy like me or a woman of color should have different onboarding, procedures, if you will, to put them in a position to win. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on what best practices is, and should that be looked at to really make systemic change?
Yeah, let me see whether I can answer that question well. I mean, best practices, and I think that's what you're alluding to, always reeks a little bit of standard practices, right? And to what extent standard practices are the right practices for everyone. I think that particularly in our profession, in people and organization, there's a fine line between making sure that you have policies in place that grant equitable treatment. So I do think that best practices, policies are there to create fairness and equitable treatment in an organization. So therefore, I think you need to be very clear on certain things, starting with things like business conduct and things that you will tolerate and not tolerate as an organization. And I think it's absolutely important to draw a line in the sand. But at the same time, I think people experience a degree of convenience, flexibility, personalization out there as consumers. A lot of that is being enabled by technology, and they come into companies and they want to experience the same thing. So I'll give you an example of something that has started, if you like, with the pandemic, but that we certainly want to carry forward outside of the pandemic. Siemens was one of the first companies to go out with a big statement last summer to say, we will grant our people 2 to 3 days working from anywhere, and grant the flexibility, but also grant the choice, because that may be good for certain people, but not for others. So I think it's about giving choice. It's about granting autonomy, and then I think we're back to the word trust as well. How much autonomy and freedom are you willing to give within a framework? And I think it is that mix of drawing certain lines in the sand, but then also giving choice, flexibility, and autonomy wherever we can.
Yeah, it makes total sense, and it's funny how a lot of it always does come back to trust, and in doing that, you're branding who you are, and that helps you attract really the very best people, because of who you are like that. Kind of leads me into my grandparents were from Kiev, and they had the accent to go with it. And they would always say, Mark, as long as you have your health, that's the most important thing. That would be the thing. So this year, Mother Nature has thrown everything at us between COVID and technology still speeding along, and racial, social justice, and you name it, everything happening. Have you seen, for lack of a better word, an awakening of people with respect to their views on work, on home, and just on community in general?
Yeah, so I think the pandemic has certainly thrown all of us back to appreciating what your grandparents have appreciated around health, certainly, because that to some extent we've probably taken for granted, and we are now reminded of how we can never take that for granted, and so the notion of looking after yourself, but then also others in this pandemic, I think has carried very much both in the private and in the work context. So for us at Siemens, it's been paramount to make sure that our people feel health, that their health and safety is our very first priority, whether they work in factories, out as in the fields, as in services with our customers, or whether they work from home. So I think that has taught us all humility. The pandemic has taught us humility to a large extent, but I think it's also shown what empathy can do, what trust and collaboration can do. And so I think we will carry a lot of that forward, and we want to carry a lot of that very consciously forward into the famous new normal. And that is about trust-based leadership, leadership that is based on outcomes and appreciating outcomes rather than inputs like, somebody's presence in the office. But I think generally people have higher expectations on companies, on organizations, in terms of how they contribute in society, and that I think has only been exacerbated by the pandemic. A lot of our people have told us through the engagement survey that we did just before Christmas that they have really appreciated how we've led through the crisis, but also how we're planning to handle things in the famous new normal afterwards. People have, if you trust, if you go to the Edelman Trust Index, people trust companies today more than they do governments or certainly the media. Right. But they also have expectations of how we earn that trust, and that we get involved when it comes to values, that we get involved on certain issues like social justice, and rightly so, because at the end of the day, we're a microcosmos. 290,000 people are a microcosmos of what is out there, and people want to be treated in a way in the organization as they hope society plays out. So I think that's a big responsibility that we have as companies, and that Siemens is certainly willing to take and live up to.
Yeah, no, it's Siemens has been a leader, and there is a reason that we commit as our company to work with leaders who care. It's not just about a video series. And there's a reason when we interview people like yourselves, it's to show people that actually caring is not a fluff or soft word anymore. It actually is good for business, and it is good for your community too. You brought up points of, I talk about well-being a lot, and there's financial, physical, and mental well-being that employees are looking for. The other thing they're looking for, which you touched on, is there's been a lot of studies that shown after like food and air, the thing that fills most people's hearts and souls is belonging. Yeah. And it's partly contributing. So as we kind of conclude time-wise here, can you give us a sense of what Siemens is? And by the way, the words human resources has been misinterpreted a lot of times over the years. It's actually great two words that I think can be rebranded in itself, human resources. But can you tell us a little bit about what's going on at Siemens, what's going on in your area that is taking care of the financial, physical, and mental well-being of people, that then also helps you attract and keep people too?
Yeah, so when it comes to physical and mental, I like to talk about resilience. I like to talk about making people strong, giving them the tools to understand what's good for them, what gives them energy, and what will ultimately help them embrace change, whatever may come, because the future is just so hard to predict. So there's a number of things that we do in terms of assisting with assessments around physical health, but also, and particularly through the pandemic, around mental health. We've got employee assistance programs, but more importantly, we also have offered a lot of tutorials to our people and their line managers to understand how you best lead, how you show empathy, how you just stay connected, and how you articulate what you need and what's good for you. So a lot of effort has gone into that. And we believe that from a financial perspective, and I think you said this was part of what your grandparents have said about education, we believe that financially, the best thing that we can each do and that we as an employer can do is to help people remain relevant as professionals over a long career. Right. And that means upskilling and reskilling. And Siemens has developed a methodology by which we really try to help businesses understand what capabilities they need at an organizational level, in an ever-changing world and with a digital disruption, but then also try to translate that as best we possibly can to the skills that are relevant for the future for our people, and then invest in learning behind that. Because we know that the working world and jobs are being disrupted and will continue to be disrupted as time goes on, and predominantly through digitalization, which is our business. So we have a particular obligation and responsibility to help our people understand what it is that comes their way and try to support that as best we can with relevant learning offers.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, and it leads to my comment of a sequel again, for sure. You're gonna have to definitely talk more about that. But people want to be cared about. People want to be loved, and that's how you're doing it, which I think is super. Really quick, with all that's happened in 2020, and now we're into 2021. What are you most grateful for?
Yeah, I mean, at a very personal level, I'm grateful for my family being well and safe and healthy. That I had them for moral support, because there's lots of people out there who are by themselves, and that must be very hard to have been doing that for a year now, being by yourself. And at a business level, I'm really grateful how we have fared through this pandemic together, in Siemens, how much we've stuck together, how much we've been able to keep up productivity. And I know that people are getting increasingly tired and fed up with the pandemic, but the level of supportiveness and help that people have given each other whilst maintaining high productivity and business continuity, I'm immensely grateful for.
Well, we're immensely grateful that you're one of the leaders who cares. I'll tell you that. And so thank you for joining us, and get ready for the sequel.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's been a pleasure to see you again. It's been a long time.
Too long.
Yeah, I know.